Chapter 166. At daybreak, Raon packed light and left the annex building. He headed towards the 5th training ground like always, since the Light Wind could use the same training ground they used during their trainee period. It was all because of Glenn's consideration of the trainees. Ahem. You are still moving so early in the morning. Wrath yawned hard to exhale coldness, even colder than the air at daybreak. I don't mind you training, but can't you take breakfast at least? I can eat at the training ground. But the food isn't delicious over there. The annex building has the most delicious and fresh food. He wasn't wrong about that. The annex building had delicious new meals every day, thanks to improving Yua and Helen's cooking skills, but the 5th training ground's typical meal wasn't exactly delicious. That was because they reduced the saltiness, sweetness, and spiciness of the food for the sake of training. This is better for training. Filling the stomach was all he asked for when it came to food while he trained, since delicacies could be left for other times. He had to quickly get stronger to decrease the list of things he needed to do, so he didn't have time to savor the taste of food. How pathetic. Wrath clicked his tongue and tilted his chin. You don't know anything about recreation. You are nothing but an idiot for training, one that is clueless about romance. Since I'm clueless about romance, I'm fine with eating nothing but Nadine bread from now on. And Nadine bread? His eyes widened in agitation. The tasteless Nadine bread, with its smooth texture that was only good for filling the stomach, was pretty much Wrath's natural enemy. Hey, are you trying to threaten the King of Essence right now? I'm not threatening you. I'm just doing what feels comfortable for me, since I can't feel romance. How a mere human dares to threaten the monarch of Devildom? A frightening amount of coldness filled Raon's body. The emotion of wrath that Wrath had given him before ripped through the emotional rift to burn his soul from various locations. Rumble. The coldness and wrath became even stronger than before, stopping his steps. His limbs trembled from the tremendous amount of energy crushing the wall and assaulting him. The King of Essence grows stronger, just like you do. You'll learn your lesson if you act up. You're wrong about that one. Raon clenched his fist to stop his hand from trembling. What? I grew up more than you did. He resonated his ring of fire. The clear resonance between the 6 rings of fire crushed the wrath, and the 10,000 flames cultivation and glacier ripped apart the coldness dashing through his mana circuit. Coup. Not yet. This is not the true power of the King of Essence. Wrath didn't give up, intensifying his coldness and wrath. Believing in the 25 points of wrath engraved in Raon's soul, he dropped the coldness on him like rain. Rumble. It was definitely not easy to endure 25 points of wrath, but he used the ring of fire that had leveled up even more to suppress the spiteful energy. He started walking again. Upon reaching the training ground while fighting against wrath, messages appeared in front of his eyes. You've withstood Wrath's interruption. Stamina has increased by 1. As soon as the messages appeared, Wrath screamed and fell apart. Damn it! He kept flailing in the air, unable to acknowledge his defeat. I like stamina. Raon closed the message and nodded. He smiled unconsciously at getting free stats from Wrath for the first time in a while. Since I won, I'm only going to eat 1 Nadine bread per meal from now on. Wait. Wait a moment. He flew like the wind and sat on his shoulder. It was the King of Essence's mistake. You should starve instead. Anything but that bread. Food that's only good for filling the stomach is pretty much a sin. Wrath's body convulsed violently. You'd better behave, since I'll keep eating Nadine bread for a month if you act up again. Coup. The King of Essence wouldn't have lost to your evil plots if he wasn't a gourmet. Having a noble soul is a sin. You should call yourself glutton instead of gourmet. Raon corrected him, then opened the training ground's door. Ha! He thought that no one would be there, but the trainees, or, rather, the Light Wind Swordsman, were already gathered. Young master! Dorian, who was eating snacks from his belly pocket, ran up to him with a smile. You are late. I think it's you all that arrived early, though? The 5th training ground usually didn't have anyone there at that hour. Raon, you are late. Even Runan, who slept a lot in the morning, was already there. She walked up to him while rubbing her eyes, then grabbed his sleeve. Poof. Raon looked aside at the sound of familiar snorting, spotting Martha as she was leaning against a tree. Every single member of the Light Wind was already in the training ground, making up to 33 people when you included himself and Martha. Why is everyone here so early? Because we are having the inauguration ceremony today. I was too excited to sleep, since the Legend of Light Wind was going to start today. Ah, I finally became a real swordsman. The Light Wind members clenched their fists and smiled in anticipation for the future. Raon licked his lips, meeting the excited gazes of the members. You will be disappointed if you expect too much. He was sure of it after seeing Rimmer the day before. Rimmer hadn't changed at all. The kids were probably thinking that Rimmer must have changed since he had become a squad leader, but that was a huge mistake. You should do some personal training until the squad leader arrives, then. Yes. All right. The Light Wind members smiled brightly and spread throughout the training ground to begin training. The chattering that could be heard occasionally was filled with anticipation for the future missions and achievements. Yawn. After seeing Renan yawn and Martha look sharply at the sky, Raon went to an empty spot. I shall begin as well. He drew his training sword and used the star-connecting sword. The trajectory was already as familiar as breathing, but its power surpassed that of an advanced swordsmanship thanks to the Ring of Fire and the 10,000 Flames cultivation leveling up. Whame! The star-connecting sword that rushed like a glorious river grew fierce. Despite having the same continuous flow, its power and speed were incomparable to before. Rumble! The aura wave spreading from the blunt training blade resonated throughout the 5th training ground. Wow! Is that really the star-connecting sword? I learned the same technique, but why is there such a difference? That's crazy. That's pretty much the highest rank in swordsmanship. People said the swordsmanship's rank depends on the user. Is talent what matters in the end? The swordsman admired Raon's star-connecting sword, which was affecting the entire training ground. Although they could use those techniques with their eyes closed, its overwhelming wave looked like an absolute technique that they'd never seen before when Raon was the one that used it. You are talking like idiots again. Martha narrowed her eyes, looking at Raon's energy as it soared into the sky. While you guys pursued a more advanced swordsmanship, he just kept training that star-connecting sword. It's more like the difference in the amount of training than the difference in talent. She murmured I also used to be an idiot to herself in the end, then drew her training sword. Wow! Runan's purple eyes were shining, trying to catch every single move of Raon's blade. You haven't changed. Dorian nodded, eating snacks instead of training. The swordsmen were waiting for the squad leader Rimmer, while spending time on their own way, but he didn't appear at the appointed time. Ahaha. Since it's the first day. I know, right? There's no way he'd be too late after such a nice speech. Let's believe that the squad leader changed. The swordsman said that and waited for another hour, but Rimmer couldn't be found anywhere in the training ground. He's coming soon, right? Probably. That bastard, elf, is going to come if he has a conscience. I'm sure he has changed after luring us in with such nice words. As the swordsmen were suppressing their anger and grinding their teeth, the training ground doors creaked open. He's here. Squad leader. You are too late. Ha! They stopped running towards him midway, their jaws dropping. The red-haired elf that had looked so glamorous just a day ago now looked completely dry, as if he had grown at least 100 years older. What even happened to you? Squad leader. Are you all right? Gasp. Squad leader. The swordsman's lips trembled as they supported the faltering Rimmer. Hello. Rimmer's spiritless eyes were spacing out, his arms flailing like reeds. Tisk. Raon clicked his tongue at the sight of him. He lost everything. It was obvious what had happened just from looking at his expression. He must have gone to the casino to increase the money he had left, just to end up losing everything. That was the only way to explain how he had become so completely broken. It's a relief that I took it away from him yesterday. If he hadn't taken the other half, the money that should have belonged to him would have turned into nothing. That would have been truly terrible. Now I'm wondering who is in that casino. Although Rimmer couldn't hide his expression, he had sharp eyes, and he had a sly and sneaky personality. He was curious about who was winning against him every single time. Ha! Rimmer went to the center of the platform and sighed deeply. The Light Wind's inauguration ceremony is starting. Our objective is my money. The honor that no one has achieved before, and my money. From now on, you will get achievements and my money. A strange word kept intruding into the inauguration speech, which should have been dignified and magnificent. Judging from Rimmer's expression, he was unconsciously saying it. Is the objective his money? Honor and his money? Achievement and his money? That guy, no way. The Light Wind members finally realized what was going on and their faces stiffened. Damn it. Why did I join this? Martha bit her lip and glared at Rimmer. Yawn. Raon just yawned indifferently and blinked her eyes. That's how the Light Wind is going to run. It looked like Rimmer finally managed to snap out of it, since he wasn't saying my money anymore. However, his face turned even more pale than before. So, since we have 33 members in total, we will split into 3 groups. The first team's leader is Martha Zieghart, and the second team's leader is Raon Sullian. I'll leave the third team's leader spot empty for now, and Raon Zieghart will command the members as the vice squad leader. You shall treat him with respect in official events from now on. Yes. Understood. I'll assign the teams now. The first team will be Set Rai, Yenden. Rimmer sounded like he was dying as he called the names of every single member. Who is going to fill the vacant third team leader spot? It's reserved for the foolish guy that is going to join soon. Since everyone knew who he was talking about, they just nodded. I'll tell you about your first mission with the Light Wind. From today onward, you shall. Rimmer licked his lips and examined the swordsman below the platform. They were waiting for him to continue, swallowing hard. Rest. What? Our rest? Are we really resting when the squad has just been created? What do you mean? Because what Rimmer told them wasn't to rest for the time being, but just to flat-out rest. The eyes of the swordsman widened as they jumped at him. What else would it mean? It means that you will rest. Rimmer shook his head with cloudy eyes that had lost half of his soul. He still couldn't get over the shock of losing all his money. Ha! Raon narrowed his eyes at the sight of him. It's rather inconvenient to not have him here. Things were getting annoying because Bain, who should have been grabbing Rimmer by his collar, wasn't there anymore. It was surprising how he came to miss Bain. That's how the world works. You don't know how precious someone is until they're gone. Ha! Since it was unbelievable that Wrath had just said that, Raon's eyes widened as he stared at the bracelet. Actually, not having those shitty eyes around isn't exactly a big deal, but the world is pretty much drowning in sorrow because the great king of essence has disappeared. The world might even end soon enough. Raon thought he was saying something nice for once, but he was just bragging about himself. However, Wrath said world this time, instead of Devilldom. It looked like something happened to the demon kings of Devilldom, taking into account what happened with Sloth, as well. I don't even know anymore. Do whatever you want. Rimmer laid down on the platform and exposed his belly. Arg! You damn elf. Why did I even do that? Their clenched fists were trembling as they looked at Rimmer's blank eyes. Ha! Raon sighed and walked up to Rimmer. Rimmer. I rest. You mean that we are going to have a mission soon enough, so we should prepare ourselves, right? Yes, right. That's what I meant. I knew the vice leader would understand me. Rimmer nodded blankly. I'll translate the squad leader's statement. Rest doesn't mean that you should just rest. He's telling you to prepare yourselves for the upcoming mission. We should decide on the signal to use between us, as well as readjust our strategies and tactics, such as sword formations. The swordsman took a step back at hearing Raon's voice. But what's wrong with the squad leader? Is he sick or something? The squad leader lost money yesterday at the casino. Hey! Stop! As Raon started to tell them the truth, Rimmer grabbed his shoulder. His face was still pale, but his hand was still powerful. Strange rumors can spread if you misspeak, so please be more careful about it. I see. Raon nodded, then looked at the swordsman once again. The squad leader lost his entire fortune at the casino yesterday, which is why he is in a bad condition today. I'll take command for now. We will start with the basic signals. Change yourselves into your training outfits, then come back here. Ah. I knew it. I guess he's been mild recently. Tisk. The swordsman threw scornful glances at Rimmer, who was hiding behind Raon, before heading to the changing room. Squad leader. Raon turned around and bowed slightly at Rimmer. In order to avoid strange rumors from spreading by misspeaking, I spoke honestly about the entire truth. Arg. His jaw dropped to the ground in amazement. But how did you find out about the fact that I lost everything in the casino yesterday? You left before me, right? A dung fly wouldn't just pass by dung. It's obvious. Who are you calling a dung fly? Rimmer's shoulders trembled furiously. Dungfly was the exact same thing that Glenn had called him last time. Why, you damn inhuman grandfather and grandson, you are forming a duo. There was a separate building to the west of the Central Martial Palace. Although it had been dusty for a long time because no one had been around to manage it, people were visiting it for once. It's been a really long time since we've been here. The butler, TIAs, who had been raising Ban instead of Karun since he was a child, smiled gently while cleaning the fireplace. Bayan didn't say anything, just staring at the pillar to his right. There was a child's graffiti under the pillar. It was a drawing of a man, a woman, and a small boy holding hands with each other. That drawing. TIAs narrowed his eyes. It was the graffiti Bayan had made in his childhood, and it was the ideal family that he had imagined in the past. Bayan caressed the graffiti, his eyes completely different from those of the smiling boy in the drawing. The pigment's particles, smeared with dust, bitterly fell from the graffiti. The boy inside the drawing disappeared at some point, and the man and woman, who weren't holding hands anymore, were the only ones remaining. TIAs. Bayan raised his head. His green eyes, which usually looked as warm as the wind, had turned as gloomy as ash. I want to be alone. You should return and rest. He spoke, then entered the completely dark room without even cleaning or lighting the room. Young master. TIAs bit his lip. He'd been watching over him since childhood, but it was his first time witnessing such emptiness in his eyes. He looked like he had lost his goal in life. It's even worse than when he lost to the young master Raon back then. He became even more passionate back then, as he said that he would take revenge, but now his eyes looked completely dead, like burned-out firewood. There are 19 days remaining. A novice swordsman that wasn't chosen during the selection ceremony had 20 days to decide on their affiliation after the ceremony. We don't have much time. He wanted Bayan to overcome his current emotions by himself, but that might prove difficult, since being acknowledged by Karun was his primary goal in life. I have to ask for help if he can't overcome it by himself. He was unable to make Bayan stand. There was only one person that had the ability to do that. Even if it takes my life. TIAs made his decision and kept cleaning up the separate building. 1 week had passed since the selection ceremony. Raon had renovated the hand signal system between the swordsmen and adjusted the sword formation stability for 33 people to fight together in the meantime. Since the swordsmen also realized that the time for the real mission was approaching, they added fresh fuel to the group training and personal training. Slam! As Raon and the swordsmen were taking a rest after daybreak training, the training ground's door burst open. It was Rimmer's doing. Not only had he arrived on time, but he was also wearing a stylish black and red uniform as he walked up onto the platform. It's nice and boring, since the guy that keeps picking a fight with me every single time isn't here anymore. Rimmer licked his lips, looking at the door that was shaking so hard it looked like it would break. Since the Light Wind members were aware of who he was talking about, their expressions turned slightly grim. Well, I'm not here to talk about that. With his signature hand clap, he gathered the swordsman's attention. Since the hand signals and sword formations are pretty much complete, you shall start making personal preparations. Personal preparations? We are training every day, though. That's not what I mean. Rimmer shook his head intensely. What I mean is that you should get your personal equipment as Sieghart's swordsman, rather than using low-quality supplies. You should start using your personal swords and uniforms. He smoothed down the Sieghart uniform that he was wearing. First of all, the uniform is custom-made. You should personally visit the Dazzling Radiance squad to place your order. The first order is free, so include as many options as you can. Rimmer tapped on the second sword around his waist. It was the noted sword he used to slay the blood-raving demon, rather than the supply sword that he usually used. Same goes for your swords. If you have a sword that you were gifted or inherited, but you couldn't use so far, you can use that one. Otherwise, you can make a new one. Use your own means to prepare it during the remaining waiting period. Yes. The Light Wind members' majestic response echoed throughout the training ground. I can finally use my Dark Phoenix. Ha, I'm so excited that I can fight with the Cloudy Blade of Brilliance. My main weapon, Super Genocider, wants to taste blood. Apparently, most of the swordsmen already had a weapon in mind, since they were grinning while calling their swords by stupid names. Come this way, Vice Squad Leader. As Raon was pondering about how to make his uniform, Rimmer gestured at him with his hand. Someone has contacted you. Who would that? That old man asked me to bring you to him. One person came to Raon's mind after Rimmer mentioned an old man. That stubborn old man Vulcan, who was staying next to the extremely hot kiln while he learned the 10,000 Flames cultivation. Raon remembered the sublime eyes of the man that had reached the peak of blacksmithing. Are you talking about Sir Vulcan? Yes, that old man. Rimmer smiled gently and nodded. He said it was time to keep his promise. Chapter 167. Raon looked at the distant North Grave Mountain. His red eyes saw not the present, but the day he met Vulcan for the first time at the charcoal kiln, after he followed Rimmer. I was able to learn the 10,000 Flames cultivation because of him. When he was anxious about the fact that he was the only one that was unable to acquire an aura in the 5th training ground, he received hints from his charcoal kiln allowing him to both learn the 10,000 Flames cultivation and reach 2 stars with it at the same time. Vulcan thanked him back then, as it allowed him to obtain a piece of golden charcoal, but Raon was the one that should have thanked him instead. So, he remembered the promise he made, when he said he'd make me a sword. Honestly, he couldn't complain even if Vulcan didn't keep his promise. It was pure coincidence that the golden charcoal had appeared, and Raon had managed to learn the 10,000 Flames cultivation, even obtaining frost in the process. However, Vulcan contacted him again, not forgetting his promise. Raon fell speechless with the overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Are you going? Rimmer also looked at the North Grave Mountain and smiled. I shall. Raon immediately nodded. I can't miss such an opportunity. The highest level blacksmiths were called the continent's blacksmiths, or the great blacksmiths. There was no way he would refuse, not when a continent's blacksmith, who was supposed to be as skilled as a dwarf, wanted to make him a sword. It does feel like you will get a rather interesting sword in your current state. Rimmer glanced over his eyes, arms, and energy center, then grinned. Go to the blacksmith's village then, since the old man is building his body over there. Building his body? He needs stamina in order to forge a proper blade. He was building his body for your sake. You will be surprised once you reach Mirtan. Mirtan. He'd heard that name before. It was a village located at the edge of Sieghart's domain, where many blacksmiths crafted nice weapons and equipment with the intense geothermal heat. By the way, Raon. Rimmer rolled his eyes. You remember who introduced that old man to you, right? The squad leader did. Yes. You should never forget that fact. You are going to obtain a sword from a continent's blacksmith thanks to the great me. He raised his chin, saying that it was all thanks to him. Although Vulcan forging a blade for him was thanks to his own efforts rather than Rimmer, Raon didn't say anything for now. That's why I'm saying that, can you give me a portion, like, a very small portion, of the gold? No. Raon shook his head firmly. Aren't you being too cold towards me? I'm the squad leader here. I'll give it to you if you promise you won't gamble. However, I know there's no way you would. I won't. I won't even go close to a gambling house. I'd rather entrust a cat with a fish. I can't trust the squad leader. Sniff, I really won't go. I just don't have money to drink. Ha! Raon laughed bitterly at the sight of Rimmer crying on the ground. He couldn't believe he was the swordsman called Sieghart's Sword of Light. Ha! Raon shook his head and took 10 gold pieces from his chest pocket, handing them over. This much should be enough to pay for liquor for a while. Ooh. It's enough. It's totally enough. Rimmer brusquely stood up and accepted the gold. Of course, there were no tear marks around his eyes. Then, see you all after you get your uniforms and swords. I'm leaving first today. He even used footwork to instantly climb the training grounds wall. Ah, Raon. Be careful on your way, since Mirtan is also used by people other than Sieghart. Rimmer waved his hand, then hurriedly ran towards the main street. His voice could be heard from far away, saying that he would take his revenge this time. He's going to gamble and lose everything again. Wrath clicked his tongue, looking at Rimmer's direction. That's obvious. Did you give it to him despite knowing that fact? It was a test. A test? Yes. Since he did that, I'm never going to entrust him with money ever again. Raon smiled coldly. Rimmer wasn't aware yet that what he did just now was going to come back to haunt him to a painful degree. Raon! Raon! Raon turned towards the voice coming from behind him. Runan was looking up at him with a blank expression. Are you going to forge your sword? Well, yeah. Let's go together. Do you also need to forge a sword? MHM. It was an unexpected answer, since he thought Runan would receive a sword as a gift from her father, Rokan Sullian. Father gave me materials to forge a sword. I'll share with Raon. He remembered her telling him she had a present for him, and it was apparently materials for a sword. I'm planning to go tomorrow. Is that fine with you? MHM. Then let's meet here tomorrow morning. MHM. Runan gave a big nod and left the training ground. She was probably going to prepare herself. The ice cream girl looks a lot brighter now. Indeed. Runan was gradually expressing more emotion, probably because she hadn't seen Sirius since that day. Though, other people probably didn't know about it, since she only did that towards him. I should get going as well. He figured he should order his uniform before leaving to make the sword. Raon went to the dazzling radiance alongside the remaining swordsmen at the training ground. Hoo hoo. The laughing sound was noble and flirtatious at the same time. Raon swallowed nervously as he looked at the middle-aged noblewoman, who was laughing while covering her mouth. How did this happen? He came to the dazzling radiance squad alongside the other swordsmen, but he had gotten separated from them somehow and he ended up alone in the squad leader's office. They weren't normal at all, since they put him inside the squad leader's office without even properly introducing themselves. I'm honored to meet the rumored vice squad leader of the Lightwind. My name is Siren, the leader of Dazzling Radiance. She bowed elegantly towards him. Apparently, she already knew about him. Raon from the Lightwind is greeting the leader of Dazzling Radiance. Radiance. Raon erased his confusion and bowed politely. This is my first time seeing you up close. I knew people in Sieghart were also famous for their appearance, but it's my first time meeting someone like Sir Raon. Lady Sylvia was amazing as well, but I'm totally impressed. Hoo hoo. Siren kept exclaiming while examining Raon's face from different angles. Her eyes were shining, as if she were looking at a piece of art. It was so embarrassing that he felt like he could die. I came to have a uniform tailored. Raon figured he wouldn't be able to return home on the same day if he did nothing, so he took a step back and declared the purpose of his visit. Ah, of course. I know that, since Sir Rimmer mentioned it. Is there a particular design you would like? Siren pointed her finger at the mannequin behind her. There were a bunch of extremely eye-catching uniforms that felt like the word flashy was plastered on them. Rather than flashy uniforms like those, I prefer something simple. Instead, I'd like various functions. That would be a shame. Siren approached him while licking her lips. The uniform's design will be killed by your beautiful face if you wear a simple one. That would be even more regrettable than being killed by a blade. I don't really care about that. I do, though, as the tailor. An art has to be accentuated by another piece of art. If you leave the design to me, I'll make something that can highlight your features as much as possible. Siren smiled gently while looking like she was dancing as she walked around the room. Where are all the ordinary people around here? He unconsciously sighed. It was seriously difficult to find a normal person in such a strange house. All right. Then, please make something flashy but still as simple as possible, and as for the functions, please make it light and easy to move in. You don't worry about the functionality. We make clothes by knitting cloud spirit threads as tightly as possible so that they can even withstand an aura blade multiple times. Cloud spirit thread. Cloud spirit thread was a rare item made by magically processing the thread made from the moth called the cloud spirit in order to maximize the durability of it. Clothes made from that thread were priceless treasures because they could hardly be pierced by a blade, and even had resistance against 4 elements. But that would be rather expensive, right? Normally, the cloud spirit thread is only used around the vital areas, but it is used as much as possible on the Light Wind members' uniforms because Sir Rimmer paid extra. The cloud spirit thread will cover pretty much everywhere. The squad leader did that? He said it was a secret, but I figured the vice squad leader should know about it at least. That's why I told you about it. Siren winked, to ask him to keep it secret. I see. Rimmer apparently paid beforehand to ask them to make the highest quality uniforms. Although he was addicted to gambling, he cherished his students even more, for sure. I really can't hate him. Raon smiled slightly, looking at the ball of cloud spirit thread that Siren took out. Now then, I'll take your measurements. Siren walked up to Raon with a measuring tape in her hand. Her face stiffened like tree bark as she touched his arms and legs to measure the length. What is this? The length and density of muscles of his arms and legs were almost in perfect proportion. She had examined the body type of countless people in her line of work, but it was her first time witnessing a body as close to perfection as his since Glenn. The more surprising part was the fact that Raon's body was still incomplete. He almost had the body of a perfect warrior, despite his growth plates being still active. She didn't believe the rumor that he defeated the warriors from the Central Martial Palace without using his aura before, but it wasn't impossible at all with the body he had, since he should have a strength and speed that transcended human limits. His might wasn't the only surprising thing about him. He was controlling his gaze and his aura perfectly. A swordsman as powerful as him at the age of 17 was unprecedented in Sieghart's history. So that legend wasn't nonsense. The legend of head of house that was reenacted during the selection ceremony. The leader of Dazzling Radiant Siren, who was also one of the important senators, smiled slightly while thinking about the legend of head of house that had been able to witness for the second time. I might really end up making the Lord's coat for this boy. The next day at daybreak, Raon arrived at the 5th training ground earlier than the day before. It was completely empty, unlike the day before. Ahem. Since you won't be able to eat the annex building's cooking for a while, how about eating breakfast before you leave? Wrath licked his lips while rubbing his belly. That's not a bad idea, but aren't you interested in looking for new delicacies? And new delicacies? Yes. Mirtan is quite developed, since there are many people visiting the blacksmith village. Don't you think it'd be fun to look for a decent restaurant there? That's not bad. I see. Although eating at the annex building right now and looking for a restaurant at Mirtan were two completely separate plans, Wrath just nodded in agreement. The gluttony demon king disguised as Wrath really couldn't think straight when food was involved. Then Raon drew his sword, looking at the dim sky, where the sun hadn't yet risen. Instead of starting with the star connecting sword, Raon returned to the basics and practiced his horizontal slash, vertical slash, and stab, one after the other. Slash. The powerful blade severed the cold air, displaying Raon's will. The strike, containing one of the martial arts' basic principles, speed, mercilessly cut through the empty space. Not bad. Since the star connecting sword and river footwork were both well-balanced techniques, he was able to incorporate speed in them despite not having practiced fast swordsmanship that much. Why have you been working on speed recently? Wrath tilted his head. He found it strange that Raon kept practicing fast swordsmanship whenever he was alone. I'm looking for a way to use this. Glacier's aura emerged from Raon's blade. Are you studying a way to utilize Glacier? Yes. Since he had managed to incorporate power, variety, and illusion with the 10,000 flames cultivation in his blade, he wanted to try using something completely different with Glacier, which was speed. That is pretty smart. However, do you truly believe that a human being is able to easily utilize Glacier? Wrath clicked his tongue, saying that he didn't know his place. You told me that the most important part of using Glacier is my imagination. I figured it would be possible if I keep imagining it in my head. Coo! Damn it! Although Wrath had been laughing at him, he started smacking his mouth, regretting what he said before. This guy never lies. It was Wrath that told him that he could do anything with Glacier, as long as he could make a proper image. That meant it should also be possible to develop the sword's characteristics with it. Whirr! Once he started using Glacier, the silver frost gradually covered the ground. Raon returned the emerging coldness to his body. What he needed to draw from Glacier's mental image was speed. He desired speed that could even cut through wind, and thrust his sword by using the fastest technique of the Fangs of Insanity, the Fang's outburst. Wham! Glacier's coldness, which was dashing through his mana circuit, burst from him, resulting in an extremely quick thrust. However, that wasn't the main part. The blade's trajectory was connected by a silver line. The powerful and quick strike passed first, and Glacier's coldness followed it. It was a mysterious technique that resulted in 2 consecutive strikes with a single swing. Ha! Even Wrath's eyes widened in surprise. And no way. Did you plan that? No, it was a coincidence. Raon just wanted to use Glacier to increase his speed. He never thought about striking twice with it. Is this because of the skill I used in my previous life? It could have been because he used Aura Shadow a lot when he was an assassin, which consisted of hiding the aura behind the blade. It should be really helpful if I can use it correctly. Raon smiled slightly, looking at the frosted blade and the ice pieces shattered in the air. I'll name it Double Strike for now. He temporarily named it Double Strike, thinking that he'd give it a proper name later on. Raon. Runan's voice could be heard from outside the training ground. Her listless voice was probably because she was still half asleep. Huff. Raon used the 10,000 flames cultivation to remove the ice pieces in the air, then walked towards Runan, who was holding a silver box. His face was glowing as beautifully as the rising sun at finding a new path for his development. Let's go. Chapter 168. In the flower garden of the wise martial palace, led by Denier Zieghart, Martha and Denier were facing each other in the middle of the garden, which was harmoniously decorated with colorful flowers and trees. I'm sorry. Martha hung her head, unable to face Denier's gaze. I have no excuses. I ended up joining the Light Wind, even though you called me to the wise martial palace. It's okay. Denier smiled slightly, as if he didn't mind. I have to understand, since I know your circumstances better than anyone else. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. Are you going to keep doing this, even though you came to visit me for the first time in such a long time? Father. Martha slowly raised her head. Her black eyes were trembling slightly, despite having usually been gloomy and cold before. Why is such a beautiful face frowning? Denier patted Martha's head with a warm smile. Ugh. Martha bit her lips, not responding. Denier had accepted her and raised her as his own daughter, even though she didn't have anything. She couldn't hide her emotions from him. It's regrettable that my youngest daughter joined another group, but I understand why you did that, since the wise martial palace will rarely clash against the white blood religion. Denier gently looked down into Martha's eyes. So, you want to take revenge by yourself? Yes. Martha replied vigorously for the first time. I want to find my mother with my own hands, and kill those bastards. Revenge won't feel as pleasant and refreshing as you imagine. You will find that you have various thoughts afterwards. But I still need to do it, no matter what, no matter the cost. I see. Denier sighed slightly, taking his sword and its sheath from his waist. He then handed it to Martha. This sword's name is Azure Cloud. It's extremely sharp, and it cleanses your mind with anti-demonic energy. What? Why would you? It's your graduation present. But I didn't even join the wise martial palace. Martha's lips parted. Since Azure Cloud was one of Denier's most treasured swords, she had never expected him to give it to her. That doesn't matter. This is just a gift from a father to his daughter. Ah. After handing Azure Cloud to Martha, Denier grasped her trembling shoulder. Since the Light Wind is a new group, it will take on many reinforcement missions, on top of the standard ones. Since they will all provide you with the experience to increase your level, do your best on each of the missions. Yes. Yes. Martha's eyes were shining as she looked at the sword in her grasp. I can't exactly call it the price for giving you the sword, but let's make a promise. A promise? She swallowed nervously while looking at Denier's mouth. She had to accept it, regardless of what he said, if it was the price for the sword. No matter how busy either of us are, let's meet each other and have a meal together at least once every 6 months. Ha, seriously? What's your answer? All right. Martha nodded, smiling brightly. It was so radiant that the Light Wind members would have fainted if they had seen it. And never take your eyes off Raon. Denier took his hand off Martha, looking at the sky. His prowess and judgment is already equal to a Vice Division leader. You will be able to learn much from him, so keep watching him and think about why he makes the moves he does. He was right. Raon slew the Green War Demon at the age of 15 and defeated the Vice Squad leader Hulling at the age of 17. Watching him made her realize so many things, to the point that the time flew by. Am I going to be able to catch up to him? Martha looked into Denier's eyes, clasping the hilt of Azure Cloud. She wanted to stand at the same rank as Raon so that she could be proud of herself. To be honest, it's hardly possible. Although your talent doesn't lose to the direct line of Sieghart, his talent is the rarest of the rare, even among the direct line. However, Denier turned around with a smile. It's not impossible. Harden your foundation while accumulating experiences as a swordswoman of Sieghart. Since your rival is right in front of you, you will get the opportunity one day if you keep improving yourself. Yes. Martha gave him a big nod. Since she had been watching Raon ever since the day she lost, she was confident in observing him. I'll never let him go. But don't fall in love with him because you're watching him too much. Even though you aren't blood related, you are still family. Father. It's a joke. Just a joke. Denier waved his hand, then returned to the wise martial palace. Ah. Martha clenched her fist. Her ears had turned red. Raon and Runan, who were heading towards Mirtan, were spending their first night in a small, nameless forest. Runan, rest here for a bit. I'll check the surrounding area. Raon waved his hand at Runan, then went to the inner part of the forest. Pineapple Girl's cooking skills are increasing day by day. Now she can make food that remains delicious even after getting cold. Wrath was licking his lips after eating Yua's special hamburger with pineapple, salami, and ham inside. He had an extremely satisfied expression on his face. The only problem is that the amount is insufficient. I need way more than this to satisfy my THM taste. THM? Being unable to understand that is proof that you are lagging behind the times. It means that I can eat 10 hamburgers maximum. What kind of abbreviation is that? He sounded like a kid from the neighborhood, rather than a demon king. Raon shook his head and went to an open area, where the trees were relatively separate from each other, and drew his sword. You said you'd check the surrounding area. In the end, are you just training? That's so boring. I've already scouted with Glacier. He didn't need to be on alert, since he had already scouted the area with Glacier. He just wanted to polish the double strike that he had practiced at daybreak. Shall I try using that? He detached the speed part of the star connecting sword and the fangs of insanity while they moved. Raon swung his sword while reciting the principles that pursued quickness. Slash. The combination between Raon's powerful body and his new swordsmanship, created from the principles of speed, made his soaring sword twist the darkened night sky. It's fast. Even though he wasn't using that much aura, it was fast enough to behead a novice-level expert in an instant. However, that wasn't the level he was aiming for. Whir! Raon increased Glacier's intensity to the extreme and pulled his sword back. Glacier's frost, which was dashing through his tightened muscles and mana circuits, exploded as he swung his sword. Wham! The strike, barely visible with one's eyes, dashed along the horizon. A fiercely freezing wave of ice followed it, decorating the space. A horizontal waterfall of ice was created in front of Raon from a single strike. It was powerful enough to rip his body apart despite his water resistance. It's even better than I thought. All he did was to polish the principles of speed that he had reformed, but the speed and power became incomparably better than they were that morning. He figured that he could create his own swordsmanship, one that could be used in an actual battle, by continuously developing that technique. It was worth practicing the basic technique over and over. The basic swordsmanship incorporated a shallow amount of most characteristics. He went as far as diving into that shallow water while others were learning more advanced techniques, and that was worth it. How was it? Ahem. That was slightly good. I mean, very slightly. It's not at a level that could gain the King of Essence's acknowledgement, but it was as slight as a speck of dirt in the eye. Wrath kept emphasizing the slight part. It looked like he didn't want to acknowledge it. I guess I should try turning that speck of dirt into a snowball. Raon snickered, practicing the new swift sword until he ran out of Glacier's frost, before returning to Runan. Sorry for being late. I was trying a new technique. Machem, I know. Runan nodded, showing that she didn't mind it. I wasn't bored because that was interesting. Did you actually feel it? Raon couldn't understand how she felt it when Runan was too far away to sense it at her current level. I was able to open a new eye in the jungle. I'll teach Raon about it later. An extremely small smile, barely visible, appeared on her face as she spoke. A new eye? He heard that the residents of Kadam Jungle, where Runan stayed for the exam, were able to perceive presences from far away without using aura. That was probably the ability she was talking about. If you're done, let's eat ice cream. She took out the beet ice cream box from her bag, then handed it over to him as if she'd been waiting for it. Ooh. As expected of the first mate of the King of Essence. Wrath checked the ice cream, drooling coldness from his mouth. You should choose first. MHM. Runan picked the mint chocolate and put it in her mouth. It seemed like she was enjoying it, since her cheeks turned red. Ahem. She picked mint chocolate. Wrath bit his lip, looking at the empty slot where the mint chocolate used to be. The King of Essence will overlook this matter because it's the ice cream girl. If it were anyone else, their head would have been smashed already. Don't make me laugh. You are just getting free treats. Raon clicked his tongue, then put the new black and white ice cream in his mouth. Ha! The crispy cookies embedded in the sweet ice cream filled his mouth with two different types of sweetness. Whoa! Wrath was too excited by the new taste, his mouth was open enough for a fly to stroll inside. Is this a trick of the demon god? How could such a taste exist in the human realm? The King of Essence has no regrets, even if he were to die right now. Raon could understand his overreaction for once, since the ice cream actually was tasty enough to enlighten him. What's the name of this one? Cookies and cream. Cookies and cream, huh? That name is engraved in the soul of the King of Essence. Ah, the great. Wrath gathered his hands together and murmured about the cookies and cream ice cream. At that rate, he would probably end up creating a song of praise about it. And this one. Runan put the ice cream box back in the bag, then took out a silver box that she'd brought to the training ground. What's this? She opened the box without replying. The pure white lump of radiant metal in the box looked like it was created by rolling the snow at daybreak into a ball. It's a steel called cold blood. Runan tapped on the cold blood with her finger, then continued. I heard a sword made from this is extremely beneficial for a swordsman that uses ice. I'll share it with Raon. Are you really sharing this with me? MHM. Runan nodded without any hesitation at all. Why? Because I need to repay the favor. The smile on her face was slightly deeper than before. Ha! Raon exclaimed. He could tell at a glance that it was an extremely precious treasure, but she was telling him she would share it. She said it was repayment, for no reason or condition he knew of. What have I even done? He already received enough of a reward for making Syria back down. He was grateful for Renan's continuous consideration, but he was clueless about how he should react. It's difficult. Raon lowered his head. The more he learned about the relationships between human beings, the more difficult it felt. The only thing he knew was the fact that he needed to return as much as he had received. I need to find out what I can do for her. Raon nodded silently, looking at the cold blood. 2 days later, Raon and Renan were looking up from the entrance of Mirtan village. Between the uphill roads, which twisted left and right like grapevines, there were plenty of workshops of various shapes, round, angular, or strangely twisted. The place where smiths, brimming with individuality, were spread out in a disorderly manner was the blacksmith village Mirtan. It's not as hot as I expected. He had heard that Mirtan was warm despite being located in the north, due to the inactive volcano Skelii right next to it, but there wasn't much difference from other places. There are a lot of people. Once he entered the village, he could occasionally see Sieghard's swordsman, and the village was filled with villagers, merchants, and swordsmen from other places. Clang! 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 He climbed the uphill road that was filled with workshops, and the hammering, the bellows blowing, and the burning sound of the furnace could be heard non-stop. The sight of the artisans working hard, drenched in sweat, was enough to give anyone motivation to live a diligent life. You are going to die if you become any more diligent. I just feel like I haven't done my best yet. I'm not talking about you. The King of Essence is going to die. Stop training so much. The King of Essence can't sleep at all. Wrath complained with a frown. Apparently, he disliked the fact that Raon kept the night watch to practice his quick sword on the way to Mirtan. Raon, where are we going? I'm not sure. Raon looked around. It was difficult to talk to them, since everyone was extremely focused on their work. As he was wondering who he should try asking, he felt someone's presence from the right. Hello? He turned his head, spotting a smiling man with a smoking pipe in his mouth. His skin was brown, probably burnt by fire, but the characteristic stiffness of an artisan didn't exist in him. He looked completely light-hearted. He was the freest person he'd seen in the village. You are looking for a workshop, right? Indeed. Raon nodded slightly. Then, do you want my recommendation, since I'm born and bred in Mirtan village? I know a talented artisan that only makes masterpieces. Although Vulcan promised to forge his sword, they hadn't yet decided on who to request for Renan's sword. That was why Raon figured it wasn't a bad idea to look into them. Who is that? Heron. I've never heard that name before. He's not that famous yet. But you'd better get acquainted with him while you can, since he's going to be huge soon. Where is he? Here. He grinned, pointing his thumb towards himself. I'm Heron, the one that will become the continent's blacksmith in the future. Raon, Renan, and even Wrath leered at him. Hey, the pretty swordswoman over there, please don't look at me like that. Give me a try. Since you have an outstanding aura, you need someone like me to keep up with your level. Heron seemed to have noticed Renan's skills, despite her not showing it on the outside. What he said about his skills was not completely false. Though, he didn't notice my abilities. Raon snickered, checking the smithy he came from. The fire was extinguished in the furnace, the floor was messy, and spider webs filled the ceiling. Tisk, no thanks. He clicked his tongue, then left with Renan. Hey, wait. You shouldn't judge from just that. No one is more skilled than me around here. That's okay. The person I'm going to see is definitely more skilled than you. Don't make me laugh. Who is it? What's their name? Sir Vulcan. The Vulcan? Ka-ha-ha-ha-ha. Heron held his sides as he laughed, rolling on the ground. Do you really believe that stubborn old man is even going to allow you to see him? He's done nothing but wait for Sieghard's head of house for 4 years now. You won't even be able to see his face. He blabbered that having the door slammed in their face would be the best thing they could get. Just leave it to me. It will be a bit expensive, but I'll make you something really great. You will regret it if you miss this opportunity. We don't need it, so just tell us the location of Sir Vulcan's workshop. You don't understand, that won't work. That old man didn't even show his face when the Zettel Kingdom's royals visited him every day. There's no way he'd open his door for you. He shook his head, telling him to stop wasting time. Then, shall we make a bet? A bet? I win if we manage to enter Sir Vulcan's workshop, and you win if we can't even see his face, just like you said. As for the terms, let's say the loser has to grant whatever wish the winner asks for. It's plain obvious, but fine. Heron nodded quickly. Another fool took the bait. Wrath sighed, murmuring that the number of victims had increased. My terms are simple. I'll forge that swordswoman's sword. And I'm the one that gets to choose the materials and the price. Heron pointed at Raon, who was standing there blankly. The way he was rubbing his hands against each other with a grin made him look exactly like a third-rate thug. He didn't want to request Raon's sword from someone like him, but he was bound to win the bet. Raon. That's fine. Raon immediately nodded, trusting him without even listening to the reason. Thank you. Raon smiled at her, then raised a finger towards Heron. Approved. I'll tell you my terms later on. All right. I'll guide you, let's go. Heron went ahead and climbed the hill. His confident expression showed that he was certain of his victory. Hey, Heron. How come you woke up before the sun set today? Is the sun going to rise from the west tomorrow, since you aren't drunk at this hour? Start working already. Your workshop is rotting, you bastard. The artisans either clicked their tongues at Heron or shouted at him to reform himself. It was enough to prove that he was the ruffian of the village. Shut up. I'm bringing those fellows to the old man, since they said they can make him meet them. Heron frowned furiously. That's impossible. It's impossible. How would they even meet the former village chief? Stop wasting time and come to us. I'll make it cheap for you. Even the royals that visited 10 days in a row didn't see a strand of his hair. There's no way they'll be allowed. That's pointless. The spectators and artisans all shook their heads, saying that they wouldn't be able to meet with Vulcan. You heard them, right? I won't cancel the bet, even if you ask. I'm not asking that, so let's get going already. How arrogant. Heron pouted, stopping in front of the artisan building on the highest hill of the village. The hemispherical building looked like an upside-down bowl, and a thick metallic door was tightly shut in the center. Clang! 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 The sound of hammering steel, done at a constant speed and strength, could be heard from the inside. The mature sound of hammering resembled an instrumental performance, and it was enough to feel how skilled the artisan was. Ahem! Heron cleared his throat. Instead of using his previous voice, he raised the tone to another level, shouting with a completely different voice. He was probably trying to hide his identity. Hey, former village chief. You have guests. Clients are looking for you. He kept slamming the metallic door as if he were trying to break it, but there was no answer from inside. You have clients. Open the door. Tisk, just leave. I'm not currently accepting clients. Vulcan's voice could finally be heard from the inside. It was deeper than before, but it was his voice for sure. See? I told you it was pointless. I'll take the down payment for now. Give me that box. Heron giggled, extending his hand towards the box Raon was holding. I knew that would happen. He's not called the continent's blacksmith for no reason. He's as stubborn as a mule. He didn't open the door to royalty. There's no way he would allow those children inside. It's regrettable that the ruffian is getting money. The spectators that followed them clicked their tongues, saying that they knew it would happen. I'll try. Raon walked past Heron, who opened his hand, and stood in front of the door. I told you it's pointless. Stop bothering the old man and come this way. Sir. Raon continued, thinking about Vulcan's smile at the North Grave Mountain the last time he'd seen him. I've arrived, after forming an indomitable mind. The continuous sound of hammering stopped at once when he spoke. Rumble. The metallic door, which seemed like it would stay shut until the end of the continent, was pushed wide open as Vulcan made his appearance alongside a powerful heat. His face was still full of wrinkles, but his eyes were brimming with vitality, and his entire body was covered with inflated muscles. You're finally here. It's been a long time. Raon and Vulcan looked at each other's changed appearance and smiled delightedly. Phew. Who? Heron's jaw dropped, to the point that his lips seemed like they might tear, as he looked back and forth between Raon and Vulcan. How did this happen? Why did that old man come out? He pinched his cheek in disbelief. He really came out. Gasp. But he said he would never open the door, not until his real client arrived. Who was that young man, for Sir Vulcan to make that expression? The smiles disappeared from the spectators that followed them at once. Everyone gasped in surprise. What a bland ending. Raon smiled, looking at Heron's astonished expression. I won the bet. Arg. When Heron started to step backward while biting his lip, Vulcan's eyes turned to look at him. Stop. Huff. Heron stopped like a marionette with a broken thread upon hearing that. You bastard, why are you here instead of working? I was kindly guiding. Nonsense. You must have been doing some obnoxious touting, rather than increasing your skills as you should. Father, that's not what happened. Silence. Considering the fact that he called him father, Heron was apparently Vulcan's son. Raon was planning on making him run some errands, or getting one of the items he made if there was anything decent, but he was probably going to be useful in different ways if he was Vulcan's son. I got another doormat for myself. Raon smiled at Heron, who was held by collar by Vulcan. Chapter 169. Vulcan guided Raon and Runan into his workshop. The interior was filled with the furnace's heat. It looked like he'd been working continuously before they arrived. Sit down over there. Vulcan pointed at a small table and chairs in the corner of the workshop. You should be honored, since this is the first time in 2 years that people from outside have managed to enter my father's workshop. Heron sat down next to them and crossed his arms. Don't make a mess and stay silent. Huff. Vulcan frowned and started to pull on Heron's ear. Arg. Father. Why are you doing this? You are the noisiest one here. Why are you sitting there when I have clients here? Go bring some tea instead. He slammed Heron's head with his fist while saying that. Qua. Please use your words. Words aren't enough to make you understand. Ha! I should just leave this stupid house. Heron furiously rubbed the spot on his head that had been hit, then went to the inner part of the workshop. I apologize for him, just in case he was rude. Vulcan sighed and bobbed his head. He wasn't initially that bad, but he became like this after meeting a gambling addict. Gambling addict? Yes, that elf bastard you're well acquainted with. Sorry? Raon and Runan's ears pricked when he mentioned the elf. Since he even mentioned gambling, there was only one person that met the criteria. What kind of trouble did our squad leader cause? Squad leader? Did he actually become a squad leader? Yes. Ha, the world is about to end. What did the squad leader Rimmer even do here? Rimmer, that bastard. Vulcan grit his teeth, looking into the air. He lost every single time he gambled against my stupid son. Rayon's eyes lost focus. He couldn't understand what he had just heard. Rimmer didn't even win against him, he just lost. It didn't make sense that he was angry at him. Runan frowned as well, an unusual expression for her. What does that mean? After winning against Rimmer, that idiot figured he was talented at gambling and threw away his hammer to visit various gambling houses. He lost his entire fortune, and he's still living as a ruffian because he still hasn't faced reality. Ah! He finally understood what Vulcan meant. Because Heron won all of his bets against Rimmer, he had become delusional and thought that he was talented with it, which led to him becoming addicted. Basically, he's saying that he misunderstood after winning against the weakest of the weakest. Wrath snorted. Anyway. It was honestly not Rimmer's fault, but troubles always happened when he was involved. It could be said that he always carried misfortune and unhappiness with him. He wouldn't be so broken up if Rimmer had only lost a few rounds against him. I don't even understand how he could lose 15 rounds in a row. And then, he even brought him around to teach him all kinds of bad things. Vulcan clenched his fist in frustration. Raon silently hung his head, since he couldn't say anything. Well. Anyway, that's now a story of the past. He sighed and gently looked into Raon's eyes. I heard about it from that gambling addict, but you grew up really well. Did the squad leader even talk about me? That damn bastard asked me to lend him some money in return for telling your tales. Raon was unable to hold his head straight whenever he heard about Rimmer's actions. I apologize for him. How much did he borrow? Raon took out his gold pouch with the intention of paying Vulcan back immediately. You don't need to do that. That amount doesn't really matter to me. However, you are even better than the stories he told. You've transcended half the wall with the aura you've accumulated. I'm extremely pleased that you reached this level in mere 5 years. Vulcan smiled pleasantly. His frown suggested that he wanted to kill Rimmer whenever they talked about him, but he was smiling whenever Raon was involved. By the way, who is this other swordswoman? Vulcan looked at Runan this time. She's my companion. We came here together, since she said she also wants to have a sword forged. I'm Runan Sullian. Runan immediately stood up and bowed. You have an extremely sharp aura, to the point that it's cold. As expected of House Sullian. Is Sieghart full of talented people right now? Vulcan admired her pressure upon reading it. I'll introduce you to the current village chief of Mirtan. I'm sure he will be able to perfectly forge the blade you want. Thank you. Runan bowed once again. Are you going to start forging right away? I would, but there's one problem. And that would be. The geothermal heat is currently a lot lower than usual around Mirtan village. It usually returns to normal within a week, but it's currently still low despite 2 weeks having passed. Vulcan tapped the ground with his feet, a frown on his face. So, that was the reason. Even though he was told that Mirtan village was relatively hot for being located in the north, it was actually only slightly hotter than Sieghart when he arrived. He had thought that was strange, and apparently there was a problem with the geothermal heat. With low geothermal heat, it's difficult to meet the temperature even if I use the golden charcoal. I think a problem has occurred in Skelly Mountain. You said you'd ask for help from Sieghart if the heat doesn't return this week. Just call them already. Heron put down the cup and kettle at the center of the table with a thud, then sat next to them. Then, shall I try investigating it? Raon spoke, turning his head towards the door to look at Skelly Mountain. Then. What? Come on. Heron waved his hand fiercely, even before Vulcan could speak. This swordswoman might be fine, but someone like you will die immediately upon reaching the mountain. There are plenty of monsters that feed on the heat. Arg. Are you blind or something? Vulcan sighed at his pathetic demeanor and smacked the back of Heron's head. Can you investigate it for us? Runan and I should be similar to the support sent from the house. Raon nodded. Since Runan was also an expert, she could easily deal with the monsters in the mountain. Please stop hitting me. Who is this guy for you to do that? This boy is the future of Sieghart. What? He? Heron, who was rubbing his head, suddenly stood up from his chair. Sieghart's future? Wait, then the promise that the old man mentioned. Yes. You mistook my words as referencing the head of house on your own accord, but Raon is the swordsman I made the promise with. But I can't feel anything from him. Are you actually telling me this young guy is an advanced expert? You would have been able to feel it if you weren't addicted to gambling for the past 2 years. Vulcan scornfully clicked his tongue. Arg. Heron bit his lip tightly, unable to say anything. We'll get going right away. If we can have a guide. There's something we need to do before that. Vulcan raised his hand to stop Raon from standing up. To work faster, I need to figure out what material suits you. Material? Just as there are many different kinds of swordsmanship, there are many different metals in the world. This is an indispensable task in order to find the metal that suits your aura and nature. Heron. Bring the golden shard stone. I'm not your servant. Why would I arg? Heron, who was sipping his tea, returned to the inner workshop as soon as Vulcan glared. He brought out a rock with a hand mark in the center of it. This rock contains the metal called the golden shard. It's the king of metals, one that can amplify any kind of energy in the world. Golden shard. Raon had heard that name before. It was a legendary metal that couldn't be bought, even if the person had the money for it. This golden shard stone, made from the golden shard, absorbs aura and tells you what kind of metal is best suited for the swordsman. Do you want to try it? I see it has a fissure. Isn't it going to break if I imbue it with aura? You don't need to worry, since it will never break. I see. Before putting his hand on the golden shard stone, he looked to his right. Runan's eyes were sparkling in interest for the first time. Runan, do you want to try it first? He pushed the stone towards her, and Runan immediately nodded. Put your hand on the concave part, then push the aura into that gap. Runan nodded, placing her hand at the center of the rock before inserting her aura. Whir! A faint silver light emerged from the fissure of the golden shard stone, and coldness emanated on the rock. Vulcan's eyes widened as he tried touching the rock. Even your aura is special. I haven't seen ice of such purity in a long time. He scratched his chin, telling Runan that she could take her hand off now. The best choice is cold blood. If that's not possible, then there's silver steel, which can take ice. I have cold blood. Runan pushed forward the box she was hugging. Oh! Vulcan exclaimed upon opening the box Runan gave him. This size and durability, it's perfect. It's superior, even among cold blood. A nice sword will be made from this. He nodded in satisfaction after touching the cold blood. Raon, it's your turn now. All right. But... Raon looked at Heron before putting his hand on the golden shard stone. He signaled for him to leave with his eyes, but... What? Is it your first time seeing a handsome person like me? He glared back instead, probably because he thought it was a blinking game. He's telling you to leave. Vulcan picked up a piece of wood from beside the table and threw it to Heron. Arg. Seriously, why would aura even be a secret? Shut up. Just guard the door. You damn geezer. Even though he was complaining, he still went outside the workshop and stood in front of the door. He apparently listened pretty well when he was told. Although he looks like an idiot, he was originally talented and passionate about smithing. After forging your blade, I'm planning on pushing some sense back into him, even if I have to smash his head open. He does look talented. Managing to notice Runan's aura despite playing around so much wasn't an ordinary ability. Heron must have been talented for sure, as expected of Vulcan's son. You should get started. Yes. Raon nodded and placed his hand on the golden shard stone. Since Vulcan must have roughly realized that he had an aura of fire and ice at the same time, it should have been okay to show him. Clang. Multiple presences could be felt from outside as he was about to insert his aura into the golden shard stone. The door is really open. Is it true that you opened the door to a young boy when you didn't even show yourself to us when we visited 10 days in a row? This is disrespectful towards us. Are you looking down on the Zettel kingdom? The enraged voices could be heard alongside the metallic sound of armor. They seemed to be the knights of the Zettel kingdom that people kept talking about on their way to the forge. What do you think you are doing? Whether the old man takes clients or not is up to him. Silence. Do you think we will overlook this matter when you look down on the Zettel kingdom? He didn't look down on you. He just had an appointed client. You should return, since you are obstructing business right now. Unexpectedly, Heron didn't run away. He stood in front of the door to stop the knights. I didn't meet with them because it was annoying, and it ended up this way. Cough. Vulcan sighed. As he was about to go outside, Heron was sent flying inside with a scream. Those bastards. Heron tried to stand back up immediately, but he faltered and fell back. The blow wasn't that powerful, but he couldn't regain his balance because he was hit on his chin and stomach. Tisk, I'll be back in a moment. I'll come with you. Raon left the workshop alongside Vulcan, who was frowning. The knights, wearing armor with a rapier emblem on the left side of the chest, were glaring fiercely at them. They were knights of the Zettel kingdom. Was it actually this brat? The blue-haired young man in his mid-20s standing at the center ground his teeth. An outstanding energy wave could be felt from him. He was a powerful knight, somewhere between intermediate and advanced expert. Blacksmith Vulcan. You are too cruel. How could you choose such a young boy when you didn't even show your face to us? I didn't choose, I made a promise. I promised this boy 5 years ago that I'd forge a sword for him. 5 years ago? He must have been a little kid back then. His eyes widened in bewilderment. Tisk. Raon clicked his tongue, looking at the knights' reddening faces. They grew up sheltered. It wasn't like he couldn't understand them at all. It was understandable that they would be angry if the continent's blacksmith, who they couldn't even see the face after visiting him 10 days straight, opened the door to a young swordsman. However, those were complaints they should have kept to themselves. If they personally visited and started pestering him like that, just because they were angry, it not only disgraced their own reputations but also their kingdoms. The way they were acting under Zettel's name could only be called immature. What did you even see in that brat to promise to forge him a sword? Why do you keep calling me a brat? That's so irritating. Raon's brows furrowed as he stepped forward. Step aside, young bastard. It's not your place to butt in. You are the one who should step aside. What? The master is taking orders from the reserved client. What right do you have to order him around when you are unrelated to the matter? That's. I don't understand what you are hoping to get here, after you even beat up the master's son. Shut up. Blacksmith Vulcan's swords are pieces of art of the highest quality. They aren't something an insect like you deserves. The young man in the center ground his teeth and stepped up. State your name. You should introduce yourself first. What impudence! Who do you think he is? The knights next to the young man looked like they were about to jump at him. We are in Sieghart's domain, not Zettel. If you want to brag about your stripes, then you should do it elsewhere. Arg! You bastard! Stop! The young man stopped the knights from drawing their swords, then stepped forward. Considering what you said, you must be from Sieghart. I'm Tarkan, Prince of the Zettel Kingdom. I'm the Blue Eagle of Zettel. Tarkan raised his chin and continued. Even Siegharts have different ranks. I can't feel any worth from you. Raon narrowed his eyes as he looked at Tarkan. So, he was a prince. He could understand why he would be so hot-tempered, since he was between intermediate and advanced expert in his 20s. However, he wasn't going to go easy on him just because it was understandable. Now that I think about it, Zettel is famous for the quick sword and precise sword. Just as the rapier emblem on their armor suggested, Zettel was famous for their fast and precise swordsmanship. Let's extort some techniques from them. Since it came down to it, he figured he'd better learn the principles of the Zettel Kingdom's swordsmanship by taunting the prince. Is he also becoming a doormat? Wrath shuddered, looking at Raon's small smile. Prince? I thought you were a thug because of your nasty actions. I guess that's how the Zettel Kingdom raises their successor. Raon smiled scornfully, trying to humiliate the prince. Shut up and state your name. I'm Raon Sieghart. Raon? I've never heard that name before. So, you were a collateral after all. I am. So what? Ha! You are just a collateral, not even a member of the direct line. How could you receive a sword from the blacksmith Vulcan when you don't have any reputation at all? Since Sieghart didn't tend to spread information outside their territory, they didn't know anything about him at all. The reputation he had earned at Haben Castle had spread under the nickname of the Young Sword Demon or the Flame Wall instead of his real name, which made it natural for them to not know about him. Then, you can test it for yourself. What? I'm telling you to test whether I deserve it or not for yourself. That's exactly what I wanted. Tarkan gladly drew his sword. The blade, thinner and sharper than an ordinary longsword, reflected the sunlight. Withdraw right away if I win. Then you should kneel and apologize for your arrogance if I win. Sure, but that's never going to happen. Come at me. I'll allow you the first strike. You bastard. Raon flicked his fingers and Tarkan glared at him, then kicked the ground. His blade was thrust towards his chest like a ray of light. The first attack was clean, despite his enraged state, probably because he trained his swordsmanship properly. Clang! Raon rotated the ring of fire, watching his sword until the end before fending it off. Humph, so you at least have something going for you. Tarkan snorted, bending his knee slightly to thrust his blade repeatedly. A nimble and systematic flow engulfed him, just like rain falling on the ground. Clang! 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 Raon used the 6 resonating rings of fire and his thoroughly trained eyesight to analyze everything about Tarkan's quick strikes. Precision is mixed into the quickness. It's an advanced swordsmanship that only aims for the vitals. Speed wasn't everything in Tarkan's attacks. It also had the precision to thrust the blade into the smallest vital points. He seemed to have learned the prestigious swordsmanship properly, despite his hyper-aggressive personality. Let's see how long you can keep blocking. Tarkan's attacks grew fiercer as he decided to show his true strength, and the energy coming from his blade became a ray of light dropping down on him. Slum! Not only the power, but also the speed had increased. The alacrity seemed to sever the space. Ha! Raon kept blocking Tarkan's endless barrage with a paper-thin difference, polishing the principles of the new quick sword that he was making. Since he'd never seen a technique that was so focused on speed before, he could learn a lot from it. Your Highness! You are almost there. He is too exhausted to even hold his sword. Finish him off. The Zettel Kingdom's knights smiled as they cheered for the prince. Since Raon kept observing Tarkan's sword until the very last moment and blocking it right before it reached his skin, it looked like Tarkan was overwhelming him. However, Tarkan was feeling miserable as he fought. What the hell is wrong with this guy? He thought he could easily win at first, since he could barely feel any pressure from him, but it became completely different once he crossed swords with him. His hand felt like the skin was tearing apart each time the blades clashed, as if he were attacking a metallic wall, and his wrist kept trembling so much it felt like it would break. Moreover, he couldn't even see the quick sword properly in the beginning, yet his sword had become even faster than his own. He must have been mistaken, but he had the impression that Raon was getting better throughout the duel. I need to finish this quickly. Tarkan grit his teeth, drawing out all of his remaining aura to surround his blade and arm. He focused the aura to the regions that were used to swing the sword, then exploded it at once. It was Zorkin swordsmanship's ultimate technique, Deadly Onslaught. Kring! The thrust aimed at Raon's chest was barely recognizable with his own eyes. There's no way he can block. Ha! Tarkan swallowed nervously. Even though he expected to see Raon panic, the young man's lips were slightly curved into a smile. I've been waiting for something like this. With that frightening voice, his hand soared like lightning. Slum! Tarkan's blade shattered like glass and scattered into the air upon being smashed by Raon's sword. Ah! Tarkan's lips trembled in fear. Raon's sword reached it first, despite having started to move later. It was extremely quick, only possible for a master. It was a nice learning opportunity. Learning? What did you lear? Cough. When Tarkan lowered his head with a trembling chin, Raon's blade smacked his snout. Smack! With his chin and mouth smacked at the same time, 4 teeth came out of his mouth like corn kernels as he collapsed. Why, Your Highness? Oh, no! What have you done? The guarding knights ran up to him to hold the prince in their arms, pointing their swords at Raon. Wasn't it a fair fight? Why are you pointing your sword at me? That's... Ugh! The knights' eyes trembled like a sailboat facing the tidal wave. It looked like they still couldn't believe that the prince had lost. If you have any problems, then come looking for me at Sieghart. Of course, for now. Raon narrowed his eyes, pointing his finger at the limp Tarkan. Tarkan. Tell him to find me to kneel and apologize once he wakes up. I hope you didn't forget about that part. Arg. Just you wait. The knights bit their lips before turning back. Just you wait, huh? Although they must have been counting on their backgrounds from the Zettel kingdom, Raon also had Sieghart's huge name behind him. They should be unable to even think about revenge once their heads cooled. You? Did you just learn that quick sword from the prince? Vulcan's eyes widened in disbelief. Rather than learning, I just took notes. Ha! You've become a real monster since the last time I saw you. He shook his head at the absurdity of the situation. They shouldn't be able to return. Raon smiled slightly while sheathing his sword. Poof. I'm grateful for your consideration, but you didn't need to do all that. Sorry? What are you talking about? You took all their attention away from us, so that me and my idiotic son wouldn't be harmed. Raon awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Vulcan had realized that he purposefully repeated Sieghart's name. The old man told him he didn't need to do all that as he waved his hand. You looked like an emotionless doll before. You must have learned human qualities as well. Vulcan snickered and patted Raon on the back. Let's go back. I want to check what metal is most suitable for you quickly. Upon returning to the workshop, Raon placed his hand on the golden shard stone. He used the 10,000 flames cultivation and glacier at the same time, inserting his aura into the stone's fissure. Whirr! The rock absorbed the red and blue aura just like a drawing paper absorbing the ink, radiating a brilliant light. This light and color means dark steel and... Ha! Vulcan's eyes widened as he approached the golden shard stone. A new light sprouted like a bud between the red heat and blue coldness, and the three energies gathered in a spiral as if they were one from the beginning to radiate an auspicious golden light. Crack! Crack! Fissures appeared like a spider web on the golden shard stone, which was never supposed to break, and the golden fever became even more intense. Wham! The golden shard stone was unable to withstand the power and shattered in the end, a small, brilliantly shining metallic bead falling out from it. Gasp! Vulcan's eyes widened upon seeing that bead. How could the golden shard show itself on its own? Chapter 170. Raon narrowed his eyes as he looked at the smashed golden shard stone pieces. The 10,000 flames cultivation and glacier weren't the only ones that moved earlier. The ghastly energy also came out of the blade of Requiem hanging at his waist, soaking into the golden shard stone alongside the two energies that he was directly controlling. And the last thing that moved when the three energies flowed inside the golden shard stone was the ring of fire. The 6 rings rotating around his heart resonated with each other to try merging the 10,000 flames cultivation, glacier, and the ghastly energy, and the golden shard stone ended up shattering because it was unable to withstand that power. Vulcan picked up the shining bead with his trembling hand. This is the first time in my life that I have witnessed the golden shard moving on its own. He slowly caught his breath while watching the golden shard, which was shining with 5 colors. Vulcan had never looked so surprised before. So, this is the golden shard. Raon narrowed his eyes as he looked at the bead Vulcan was holding. The mysterious energy flowing from it easily showed the reason it was called the King of Metals. Yes. This is the golden shard that supposedly amplifies all kinds of energy. The fact that it's shining like this means that it likes your inner. As Vulcan was talking while showing him the golden shard, Heron, who was lying down next to them, suddenly woke up and crawled towards them. How the hell are you using coldness and heat at the same time? And how did you destroy the golden shard stone? His eyes were wide, as he had watched the golden shard stone shatter into small pieces. I thought you fainted. Raon made him faint because he kept struggling because of the pain, but he had to have woken up when the golden shard stone shattered. Old man. What kind of monster did you bring here? Shut up and sit down. Vulcan smacked the back of Heron's head to make him kneel. If you blabber about what you saw today, I'm seriously going to smash your head in. What? How could you do that to your son? That doesn't matter. What's your response? I won't. I have no one to talk to about it anyway. Heron screeched, then yelled at him to stop beating up a patient. Even though he's an idiot, his mouth is heavy. You don't need to worry about it. Vulcan smiled slightly, rolling the golden shard around in his hand. All right. Raon nodded. When you considered the fact that he tried stopping the Zettel Kingdom's prince and knights on his own, despite being unable to use any martial arts, he seemed somewhat trustworthy. Heron turned his head while complaining. He was rubbing the back of his head, which was still hurting. Let's continue, then. You used another energy besides coldness and heat earlier, right? Yes. However, it wasn't me that used it, Anne. Raon drew the blade of Requiem and showed it to him. A possessed blade. Vulcan recognized at a glance that the blade of Requiem had ghastly energy inside it. Yes, it's a sword forged by the blacksmith Kuberad. What? Did he actually make a possessed blade? He stared at the blade of Requiem in bewilderment. How did he end up making a possessed blade with his stubborn personality? There were circumstances around it. In the Siren village, south of the continent. Raon closed his eyes, telling him the tale of the blade of Requiem's creation. I see. That's understandable. Vulcan nodded, saying that he finally understood. Is that blade sleeping right now? It remains silent unless I ask about it or the white blood religion appears. Except for the time it moved on its own earlier, the blade of Requiem usually remained immobile, as if it were sleeping. It almost looked like it was trying to save its strength in order to take revenge against the white blood religion. It doesn't amount to much if an insignificant creature saves its strength. It will still be weak enough to be crushed by a single flick of the King of Essence's finger. Wrath twisted his lips, looking at the blade of Requiem. Whirr! And ghastly energy started to emerge from the blade, telling him to stop making it laugh. Humph! Wrath snorted, crushing its ghastly energy with his coldness. This is how much more superior I am when compared to you. Beg the King of Essence, and he shall grant you revenge instead. Does losing in terms of strength signify that it's inferior? Of course. Strength is status, and it is the rank of existence. That means that you are inferior to me, then. What do you mean? How would the King of Essence be inferior to a mere human? But you always get beaten by me. Ugh. Wrath's jaw dropped, and he was unable to refute the matter. Hey, inferior Demon King. Stay beaten, please. Raon looked down on Wrath while caressing the blade of Requiem. Why, you bastard? Wrath couldn't hold himself back anymore, frost and wrath bursting from him to invade Raon's mana circuit. Whirr! Raon easily fended off that powerful attack by using the Ring of Fire, the 10,000 Flames Cultivation, and Glacier, before returning the blade of Requiem to its scabbard. Possessed blades are wicked by nature. However, it can either become a divine blade or a demonic blade depending on how you use it. So, it's all up to me in the end. Yes. That blade's resentment is so intense that I can see it with my eyes. Just like its name, you should help it complete the Requiem, and return to its natural path without being devoured by the energy. All right. Raon gripped the blade of Requiem tightly before sheathing it again. You should be able to do it. Vulcan smiled gently, patting his shoulder. Humph, people would say he's your son if they saw this. Heron pouted, his arms crossed. Shut up. Arg. Vulcan glared at him, and Heron stepped aside with his shoulders drooped. Raon, try touching this. Vulcan handed over the golden shard that he was still holding in his hand. It had turned black, no longer shining with 5 colors. Raon nodded, grabbing the golden shard. Whirr! As soon as he touched it, it started to radiate 5 different colors and trembled with a clear resonance. Gasp! Huh, I see. Heron's hands trembled in astonishment, and Vulcan admired the sight. Why is it doing this? The golden shard is addicted to your energy. It's saying that it wants to serve you, for you to be its master. Does it actually have an ego? It can't really be called an ego. It's just an instinct, like a flower spreading its leaves towards the sun. Raon licked his lips and looked at the golden shard. He was currently controlling 3 different energies inside of him in order to stop Wrath, and the golden shard apparently liked those energies, as it kept shining and vibrating. Can you put this in my sword? I'll pay whatever the price. I don't need it, kid. Vulcan snickered and shook his head. Since it has already decided its master, I don't mind giving it to you. The problem is that the quantity is insufficient. Quantity. He was right. Since the bead was small enough to hold in his hand, it couldn't even make a dagger. Not just making a sword from it, it can't even be used to harmonize the two metals suitable for your energies. What does it mean to harmonize? Since you use both heat and coldness, the best method to assist them is to mix two different metals and add the golden shard as a finishing touch. I have flaming steel to use for the heat, and silver steel for the coldness, but I don't have enough golden shard to connect them. Vulcan gave a slight, bitter sigh. This can be used instead of the silver steel. Raon, who had been silent, handed over the box containing cold blood that she was embracing. I'll give him everything left over after making my sword. Really? This is a higher quality cold blood. It's okay. She said she would give away the cold blood without any hesitation. I guess it's fine if you are okay with it. Vulcan nodded and looked at Raon. He seemed to be asking what relationship they had. We are companions. Raon shrugged his shoulders. Ahem, then the only problems left are the golden shard and geothermal heat. Vulcan slowly stood up, straightening his spine. I'll look into the golden shard part. You two should go to Skelly Eye Mountain and investigate the reason for the low geothermal heat. Understood. Then, we'd like a guide. There's someone right there, a guy that has nothing else to do. He pointed at Heron, who was trying to crawl outside. Arg. He knows the surrounding area really well because he has loved running around since he was a child. Just bring him with you. Ha, why would I go there? I'm going to work, since I suddenly got a great idea. Tisk. I'll go. Heron quickly stood up and nodded. Raon. Raon left the workshop with Raon. We'll be back. You don't need to solve the problem, so please be careful. Yes. He nodded and turned around. You bastard. How long are you planning on ignoring me? I wasn't ignoring you. There was no way he could ignore the coldness stabbing him or the wrath stirring his heart. He was just enduring it while pretending he wasn't affected by controlling three different energies. Fine. Let's fight to the bitter end today. You shall learn the height of the King of Essence's level. It's pointless. Wrath used everything he had to attack the wall in his mana circuit, but Raon hardened the 10,000 Flames cultivation and glacier to block everything. Rumble. A fight of strategy and power continued inside his body, but Raon didn't manage to lose any of them. Coup. The King of Essence won't give you. As he was about to explode the last remaining bit of energy, messages appeared in front of Raon's eyes. You've withstood Wrath's interruption. Perception has increased by 1. You've nonchalantly endured the pain. Stamina has increased by 1. The judge was announcing Wrath's defeat. Again? Daoamit. Wrath blacked out and collapsed backwards. I told you to stay crushed if you are at a lower level. Raon smiled coldly as he watched Wrath faint on his bracelet. Hum. Rimmer knocked on the audience chamber's door in the Lord's manor while humming. My lord. Strangely, it wasn't Glenn's voice that greeted him. Instead, it was Ren that stepped out and bowed to him. The head of house went outside for a moment. What? I thought he caught some illness that killed him if he went outside. Did he not? Rimmer flailed his hands in disbelief. I haven't seen him in action in a long time either. Ren smiled slightly. Where did he go? He didn't mention his destination. He just said that he would be out for a moment and that he would return around evening. You shouldn't let him go like that. What if something happens to the head of? I guess nothing will. Rimmer swallowed hard. No one had any reason to try harming Glenn, and they would see a living hell if they tried. You don't need to worry. He left with the heavenly blade. Well, that's fine, I guess. The division leader of the Heavenly Blade was an extremely powerful warrior that had been with Glenn from the beginning, just like Ren and Rimmer. There was no problem if Glenn was with her. Why did you come to visit the head of house? I came to report various things. Raon and Runan left, Bayan is still sulking in a corner, and Martha is working hard on her training. I can convey that to him, if that's all. And Rimmer grabbed Ren's shoulder tightly as he tried to leave. I was wondering if the squad leader's salary. I believe that has been paid in advance. Could it be paid in advance, or I would like to borrow some money? Actually, the head of house left a message before he left. Ren smiled and removed Rimmer's hand. A message? He said that if ever Sir Rimmer mentions something about advance payment or asks to be lent money, he would personally visit him to have a warm conversation, but... See conversation. Rimmer swallowed nervously and stepped back. He said conversation, but it was obvious he was going to try to speak with his fists. Sir Ren, we can keep it a secret between us, right? Of course, I don't mind keeping it secret at all. However, Ren secretly pointed upward. I wonder about them. Ah. Rimmer looked through the heavenly blade swordsman hiding on the ceiling and frowned. There was no way they would listen to him, since the heavenly blade only listened to Glenn. The saying goes, enjoy the present. Getting beaten up is a matter of the future, while fun is in the present, so I'd rather have a conversation later. Rimmer didn't withdraw and extended his hand. I believe it's impossible for you to win bets against him, even if I give you an advance payment. A warrior's spirit is meant to challenge the impossible. Hoo. Ren apparently liked that line. He smiled slightly and placed a gold pouch in Rimmer's hand. Thank you. I'll bring back the news of my victory today. Rimmer turned around, even using footwork to quickly leave the Lord's manor. I can see a death god. Ren narrowed his eyes, watching Rimmer's back as it got further away. It felt like the death god's shadow was smiling. Anyway. Ren opened the audience chamber's room once again and spoke in a chuckling voice. I wonder if he has arrived by now. Heron was guiding Raon and Runan at Skelly Mountain. Please climb silently, since monsters are going to swarm towards us if they hear us. He knew all the locations that the monsters didn't appear, but they still needed to remain silent. Some monsters were sensitive to sound. By the way. He quietly turned around to look at Raon. The golden shard chose him. Even though it was called the King of Metals, it was merely lifeless steel. He had never heard nor seen a soulless piece of metal vibrating in order to choose its master. What are you planning to do with it? Likely because he witnessed a scene that could be called a blacksmith's legend, he carefully spoke to him despite being much older than him. What do you mean by that? Raon tilted his head in confusion. You know, the bet you made with me. I'll decide on that later, since you said you would grant me any wish. Even then, something that is too difficult or takes a long time would be. Any means it includes all of that. Arg, I can't accept that. Gaining a leash with a single bet. As Heron was trying to shake his head, Raon drew his sword. He walked towards him with a frightening pressure. Wait. You can't swing your sword just because I refused a little. I'll do everything. I said I'll do every. Gasp. He extended his hands, trying to stop him, and closed his eyes. However, the pain never arrived. Instead, some kind of sticky, muddy water was dripping on his head. What? When he opened his eyes, green blood was flowing from Raon's sword, and 3 monsters that looked like huge flies were split in half. Are red flies? They were insect monsters that lived in heated areas like deserts or volcanoes, and they were nasty monsters that sucked on the bodily fluids of living creatures. Thank you. Heron instantly bowed. He thought Raon was trying to attack him, but he was actually defending him against the red flies coming up from behind him. It would be annoying if our guide were to die. Raon smiled, casually saying something scary. He is a scary guy. His actions just then not only saved his life, they also warned him to be careful of what he said. It wasn't a mind game that a 17-year-old boy could play. But those monsters. Heron narrowed his eyes while looking at the red flies. Don't usually come around here. Monsters never used the path they were currently using, not in the last 10 years. And it wasn't one monster that appeared, it was three. That was an abnormal occurrence. Just like the changes in the geothermal heat, the monster's ecology must have changed as well. Raon, who was behind him, stepped forward and continued. I'll take the lead from now on. But you don't know the area, right? I don't know the area, but I can feel their presence. I think I figured out where the problem occurred. It's pretty serious. He narrowed his eyes, looking at the upper part of Skelly Mountain. Runan, please defend the rear. MHM. The silver-haired swordswoman, who had been as silent as a doll, nodded. Let's resume. Raon took the lead. Haran hadn't told him anything or showed him the map, but he properly followed the flow of the geothermal heat amidst the complicated area. Ha! Haran exclaimed. Did he actually feel the source of the problem from here? It was amazing that someone who had come to Mirtan for the first time had recognized the source of the problem when Haran couldn't be sure, despite having been living there his entire life. He must be lying, right? Haran thought it couldn't be true, but Raon's footsteps were brimming with confidence. He climbed the mountain straight up, not hesitating once. And that wasn't the only surprising part. As if he could feel every single sign in his surroundings, he immediately beheaded the monsters in a single strike whenever they appeared. The Zika orc, infamous for its ferocity, lost its head before even swinging its axe, and the flame snake that could breathe fire was separated into 8 pieces as it fell like leaves. The girl named Runan, who was behind him, was the same. 5 gray scorpions, all of which had flame poison, attacked her at once. She froze them all in an instant by spreading powerful frost. Is this really the level of a 17-year-old? Is this what a true Sieghard is like? Haran swallowed nervously. Even though they were still young, he was excited to witness proper warriors of Sieghard after only meeting people like Rimmer, who had a screw loose in his head. I think I understand why the geezer told me to watch them properly. He finally understood the reason his father told him to not take his eyes off of Raon and Runan. He got the urge to take up his hammer and strike any metal as he witnessed the prowess of the young warriors. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about gambling. His fingers twitched as if he were holding a hammer. Raon kept thinking about the principles of his quick sword while climbing the mountain and slaying monsters. Something's still missing. He combined the principles of speed from the star-connecting sword, the fangs of insanity, the swordsmanship of the 10,000 flames cultivation, and the technique of Prince Tarkan from the Zedel kingdom that he had recently met. He kept imagining it in his head, yet he still couldn't achieve the speed he wanted. I can't tell what I'm missing. He had the feeling that he could create an extremely fast technique by slightly polishing the principles in the form of the swordsmanship, but it was proving difficult. Kra! 4 Zika orcs appeared from the right, brandishing their huge axes as they charged at him. They were brimming with killing intent, ready to shred a human into pieces. Slash! Raon raised his wrist slightly and slashed diagonally. The energy coming from the point of the sword looked like it would sever the space as they fell. Kra! The orcs collapsed, their faces planted on the ground before they even reached him. Their expressions looked like they had died before they even realized they were cut by a sword. The strike was fast enough for Zika orcs with excellent senses to die before even realizing they were hit, but Raon's eyes remained unsatisfied. The speed is also problematic, but the direction went wrong. If he only focused on the speed, he wouldn't be able to precise cuts, and he would end up leaving room for a counterattack. It was necessary to focus on his speed and precision together, bound together like a magnet. Raon climbed the mountain by following the flow of the geothermal heat, all while combining and weaving together the principles of his quick sword one by one. After climbing for almost half the day, he finally managed to reach the place where the explosively huge energy he had felt from below was crouching down. I'm telling you that we went too high. The place where the flow usually has an issue is underneath. Silence. He hushed Haran, who kept telling him to go to the location where the problem usually occurred, and pointed in front of him. Rumble. There was a small rocky hill that looked like sharp boulders were piled up on top of each other, sitting in the middle of the mountain ridge. The area was saturated with a hazy heat. The hill was wriggling, which gave the impression that it was breathing. Was there a hill like that around here? Haran skeptically scratched his beard. It's not a hill. Raon caught his breath and drew his sword. The moment he showed his murderous intent, the hill raised itself up and created a powerful firestorm. Whame! A head raised above the tremendous wave of fire that spread out throughout the mountain ridge. It was a huge creature of flame with 2 horns attached to a dragon's head. There was a turtle shell on its back. Whirr! The pressure flowing from its crimson eyes as it covered the setting sun had said that it had already transcended as a monster. A red dragon turtle. Heron unconsciously fell back upon meeting the huge monster's eyes. I've never seen something so huge before. How can a monster be as big as a mountain? His lips trembled in disbelief. A red dragon turtle the size of a mountain, huh? A blue fever sparkled from Raon's eyes. The young man was supporting his sword on his shoulder. It looks like I can gain a lot from it.